quiet, numbskulls. I'm broadcasting.
Hello, you're listening to the podcast, So There I Was. This is episode number 113. Is that a trick question? Is that a trick question?
But it turned out it wasn't, which is good.
No, yes. On more than one occasion, he thought, is that a trick question?
Yeah, this is a guy who's neither a pilot or an air traffic controller or a drill instructor or anything like that, but fascinating.
Oh, my God.
Listen to.
He rubbed elbows, got firsthand stories from some of the most historic aviation and aerospace legends that ever were.
Face to face with Emperor Hirohito, Neil Armstrong, General Doolittle, Colonel Tibbets, Wally Schirra, and, dozens more.
He goes on and on and on. And there are just so many little snippets. It's like, and then my boss asked me to, at 10 o'clock let General Doolittle in through the service entrance and get him to my office. What?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to go out to the aircraft carrier and spend the night? Okay.
What? Is that a trick question?
That's a trick question.
Oh my gosh. What a 20-year career and as the curator, right? And it's amazing because the first 10 years of that job, it was just him and one other guy doing the whole thing.
Doing the San Diego Air and Space Museum and some amazing stuff. And rubbed elbows with some amazing people as a result of that. So that was pretty cool. I think we need to get out of the way pretty soon. One other thing we need to mention first is sponsor this week to make this show come to you is FTIratings.com. So for those of you looking to transition into flying in the big leagues of the airliners, go get your ATP, CTP, or if you want a type rating, do it in an air-conditioned simulator where it's safe, and even if you do happen to crash, you get to walk away from it like nothing ever happened. Not if you're doing it in an Aztec or an Apache or...
Oh, my gosh. I know.
It smells like old fuel and used sweat socks.
Exactly.
Don't do it.
Oh, these guys know what they're doing. Their training materials are cutting edge. It's really the way to go.
And they're going to train you to your check ride. They're going to show you what your check ride's like. You're going to get the chance to do it a couple times. When you're there with the examiner, it's going to be like, done this. Been there, done this. Yeah. Give me my type rating, dude.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
Yeah. FTIratings.com. Use your veterans benefits and pay your tuition. Get $100 off when you mention this. And boom, done. So, hey, I think the thing for us to do is get out of the way. Listen to CC's amazing stories.
Yeah. They're good.
Hey, don't sit on the ejection seat handle.
Don't.
This here's a true story
on it.
about crossing the pond.
Here's CC.
At night in the world's smallest cockpit, on the tanker, through the weather. Oh, and to the tanker crew who did that. Thanks a lot. We really appreciated that. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. There I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fun.
And so there I was, guys, about 6 years into my 20-year career as a museum guy. American Fighter Aces Association was having this convention in San Diego that year, and we were playing host to some of the Germans that accepted the invitation to come across the pond. I'm up in the boardroom having lunch with General Gunther Rahl. He's doing a press interview over in the corner, and one of the reporters knew a little bit about Messerschmitts, and he said, "General, I know you had a 37-millimeter cannon firing through your propeller hub. It was so long, the breech actually stuck into your cockpit. I'm wondering, General, when you were firing your cannon, did your cockpit fill with smoke?" And Rahl kind of leans back a little bit, takes a bite out of his sandwich with a little bit of his thumb missing from an Allied bullet. He says, "Nine. When I was firing my cannons, the other guy's cockpit was filling up with smoke."
And that is how great aviation tales begin. Gotta love it. Repeat here from New Hampshire tonight. Where's my co-host?
I am in Kearney, Missouri.
In your fighter
just
bar.
outside Kansas City. Yes, in Fig's Fighter Bar. That was an awesome opener, my friend.
Right? That's
Wow.
right up there.
Yes.
Love it. Love it. So that's CC, Cory Crowell, the curator of the San Diego Air Museum, right, sir?
Correct.
Yeah. So
Outstanding.
first came to us as a listener and joined us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/sothereiwas.us, where we have over 1,400 members and growing. So cool. So thank you so much. Saw some of your stories there and went, oh, we've got to chat with this gent. And as you can tell, we're in for a fun little show here.
Oh,
So,
yeah. Yeah, we got interesting personalities and some good stories. And just behind Brian Shul, I'm the second luckiest guy in the world. How about that?
Well, there you go.
All right.
And that was Punchy from episode 60-something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
66, 67, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Good guy.
So, well, tell us about how you became interested in aviation.
Well, I got to blame Dad. He was a Atlas silo base activation guy. He was putting the birds in silos out in Kansas when I was little. That led to a move to San Diego where they were making the Atlas. And I just always had pictures of the moon on my wall from the probes. I had posters of the universe and I had a little G.I. Joe space capsule. I was just into airplanes and space unbelievably. Dad took me to an air show in Merced when I was 9 years old, put a leather helmet and goggles on me, stuck me in the cockpit, and I went for my first biplane ride. He's got a good picture of that and pulls out every once in a while.
That's awesome.
Kind of got the bug then. Went to air shows. Yeah, there I am in my little goggles.
Yeah. Putting it up for the watchers.
Yeah, about 20 years later, I was headed out to my first trap aboard the aircraft carrier, the Constellation. Somebody had canceled, and the boss said, "Hey, there's an empty seat. You want to go out and spend the night on an aircraft carrier?" And I'm like, "Is that a trick question?"
Right.
Yeah, roger that. So I just always, the typical guy going to the air shows, going to the local museum, building model airplanes, flying model airplanes. Dad was a modeler himself. And as I said in one of my Facebook posts last February, in February 22nd, 1978, a museum burned down and changed my life's path forever. The old Aerospace Museum in San Diego, in Balboa Park, the heart of San Diego, caught fire, and we lost the entire collection of aircraft, the archives, everything. Emoliated, fell into the basement. It was a complete and total, utter disaster. It broke
Heartbreaking.
Broke San Diego's heart. Broke San Diego's heart and mine. I went down there about a year and a half later when I heard they were hiring and got interviewed and left with a job. But I later spoke to another friend of mine who went down there the morning after the fire. The building was still smoldering, and they were picking through trying to find if there was anything that survived the fire. And my friend went down there to see if he could help, and they already had a little trailer parked out front of the ruins with a handwritten sign on there saying Air Fund. That was going to be the fundraising arm of the museum. And he knocked on the door, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning, and a nice secretary lady named Marcia with a wonderful Southern accent opened the door and said, "Well, the fellow running the show is Zeke, and he stepped out for a few minutes, so he'll be back. Would you like to have some coffee out of our paper cup?" And Larry shrugged. He says, "Sure, I'll hang out." Yeah. And sure enough, about 10 minutes later, in walks Zeke, good-looking, handsome, former Blue Angel Zeke, World War II ace Zeke, first president of the International Aerospace Hall of Fame Zeke, just a real go-getter guy. And he's slapping his hands together, rubbing his hands together. He's giggling like a little girl. And he says, "I just got $1 million matching grant." 9:15 in the morning. As long as we make $1 million, they're going to match our $1 million. And so the museum was off and running. And that was Zeke to a T. What a guy. I love that guy.
Yeah. And the Zeke to whom you're referring is Zeke Cormier?
Correct. World War II Hellcat ace. He was the leader of the Blue Angels back in the 50s for 2 seasons. He transitioned the Blues from the straight wing Panther to the swept wing Cougar jet. And he was also the guy who bumped the Blues up from a 4-member team to a 5-member team. He brought in a wingman of his from Korea and added him as a solo pilot. Later, they added the second solo pilot, but
he did that to cut down on the dead time between passes, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, he said by the time the 4-plane Diamond flew around the valley, people were munching their popcorn and looking at their watches and wondering what's going to happen. So he put in the solo in just to come and make some passes to keep people's attention. And then I think another season or 2 they added a second solo, bumped the team up to 6. But great guy.
Is it Zeke?
He was my first boss. He took over the museum and was the interim director in 1980 when I showed up and got hired. But he had no interest in running a museum. He did not want a desk job. He did not want an administrative job. He says, "I'm here to make money." So he got that. He got that Blue Angel number 5, and who just recently retired as a captain. And he said, Ed McKellar, and he says, "Ed, how would you like to run a museum?" And here's McKellar, just recently retired, and he says, "Zeke, I don't even know how to spell museum." And Zeke said, "That's okay, Ed. Believe me, nobody down there knows how to spell it either. You'll be fine."
Nice.
So McKellar
It almost sounds like Tom Sawyer, No, you can't whitewash this fence.
That's right.
No, you can't run this museum. You'll love it.
So McKellar took the reins back in 1980, the same year I started, and he was there for 20 years. He retired from the museum in 2000, same year I did. So I've been gone for 24 years, so I'm not all that relevant down there anymore. But I was only 22 years old when I started that job in 1980. And
that's outstanding.
The World War II aces were young. The moonwalkers, they were still in their 50s. It was a great time to build a museum from scratch.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And
talk about timing. You had excellent timing. Holy cow.
It was awesome. So I told people, I said, when I was 11, we were on a cross-country road trip, and we stopped at Cape Canaveral. Dad had a few connections from the Atlas program that were going to give us a tour. And Neil Armstrong and Buzz had already landed on the moon and were on their way back. We were touring the vertical assembly building and with my dad's friend and my mom and me, and we're the only people in there without hard hats. And I see the Apollo 12 capsule on a gantry coming across the ceiling, getting ready to be mated onto the Saturn. And I'm like, I don't think we're supposed to be in here. But made an impression on me for sure. And I thought, well, I wonder if I'll meet an astronaut. I was a little naive. I was only 11 back then. And I said, maybe I'll meet an astronaut on this trip. I never did. But 11 years later, I started at the museum and, met all the astronauts, met all the test pilots, met all the aces. And it's almost like a Field of Dreams thing. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
That's really amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to hear some of the things that you learned from these people in person.
Yeah.
Not secondhand, but from from the source.
Exactly.
So I'm looking at the notes. Your first boss, that was Zeke. Yeah. He led you to meet Wally Schirra somehow.
Yeah, Zeke ended up being neighbors with Wally, just a few houses down from the nice Tony San Diego neighborhood. And Wally settled in about 1990 or so. And we had a donut-shaped building that was 100,000 square feet of exhibit space, and it had 32-foot high ceilings. So we had places to hang aircraft from the ceiling. So that's what I did for the first 10 years I was there. It was just me and the curator, 2 guys doing what we did. And we'd push airplanes around, we'd hang them from the ceiling, we'd dress mannequins, we'd fill showcases, whatever needed to be done for the day. And we started chronologically with the Wright brothers, Lilienthal, Cal Rogers, World War I. We worked our way around this donut-shaped building till we got to the space exhibit, which we finished about 1990, about the time Wally showed up. And we had live, full-size replicas of the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo capsules. And we nicknamed the space exhibit Wally World because the Animal House Vacation movie had just come out about that time, and everybody knew what Wally World meant. So, yeah, Zeke and Wally
It's awesome.
popped into the office one day, and I was still kind of starstruck. I wasn't used to seeing Wally around the museum much, but he and Zeke and their other neighbor, Phil Wood, the commanding officer of the Kitty Hawk aircraft carrier, they went in, all three of them on a book, and they called it Wildcats to Tomcats because Zeke was in Wildcats. Wally flew fun stuff in Korea and space capsules, and then Phil flew Tomcats. So it was just a sexy little title from Wildcats to Tomcats. And Wally's passing around books. And he said, yeah, we really wanted to call it The Tale of Three Hookers, but the publisher turned us down. So I stole one of the books, and I went around the corner to the color Xerox room. And about 5 minutes later, I came back with a beautiful book cover that said Tale of Three Hookers, and I thought Wally was just going to split a gut. He thought that was the greatest thing.
Yeah.
He said, that's fantastic. He says, how did you do that? And how many can I have? And I said, Wally, I'll make sure you leave here with a dozen book covers. And
how many do you want?
After that, he knew who I was and would stop in my office and say hi and would autograph Life magazines for me and that.
Wow.
That G.I. Joe space capsule I had. And
That's incredible.
Yeah. I was actually in his little sailboat when he and Zeke had a little regatta out on San Diego Bay. I was out there with Wally and his wife, Joe. And believe me, I felt pretty damn special.
That's huge.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine that. That's surreal.
Yeah.
Right?
Because, he's one of my childhood idols.
Yeah.
Those guys were all, just unbelievably not human. They're like almost godlike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bigger than life.
And it wasn't until yesterday when we were chatting that I realized that Wally did not land on the moon.
Correct. Yeah. He flew in all three programs, but he was a shakedown flight for the new command capsule that the old one burned up Gus and the Apollo 1 crew. So he redesigned the hatch, redesigned the thing from top to bottom.
He was Apollo 7, right?
Correct. So
okay.
So Apollo 8. They wanted to do something spectacular, but the lunar lander was not ready yet. The contractor was still working on it. But they were feeling the pressure from the Russians, and NASA decided to launch Apollo 8 out for a big round trip around the moon, take about 10 orbits around the moon, take some pictures, and come back to Earth. And if anybody remembers, the Life magazine at the end of 1968 had a big picture of the Earth from space, and the astronauts read from the Genesis, and it was quite the event. About maybe 12 years later, in 1990, we invited those three astronauts to the museum to induct them into our Hall of Fame, the Apollo 8 crew. And I volunteered to be the photographer for the night, Boss is like, hey, anybody want to be a photographer? And I, climbed over three people. I said, yes, thank you. So I was there taking grips and grins and getting their plaques to the podium and all that. And Buzz was there, and Mike Collins was there also. They were kind of emceeing the event. So after everything was over, I packed my camera gear in my car and got myself one of those Earthrise pictures, the picture of the Earth coming up over the horizon. Yes. And a Sharpie pen, and I walked back into the dining room, and Lovell saw me walking up to the table first, and he snatches the picture and the pen out of my hand, and he goes, I'm going to sign this mother so big because I took that picture. And he starts signing up the other thing. And Borman is like, oh, BS, Lovell, you didn't take that picture. You didn't even have film in your camera. He says, I took that picture. And then, of course, Anders is like, oh, you guys are so full of it. You're going to float away. You know, everybody knows that I took that picture. So here are these three guys signing this print. And I'm just like, I didn't have to say a thing.
That's awesome.
And then Buzz grabbed the pen and signed it, and so did Mike. And probably a year later or so, Neil Armstrong came to the museum. There it is. Neil Armstrong came to the museum, and I was his gopher for the film crew for the week he was filming. And he was not signing autographs then anymore. He had quit. But I brought this print out, and I said, geez, you know, I was kind of saving this for you. You know, if you want to finish it off. And he just took it and signed it down the bottom. So I don't know about such things, but I think one piece that has the Apollo 8 and the Apollo 11 signatures on them is kind of a rare thing. What do you think?
I think it's rare.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I think I did a good thing by volunteering to be the photographer that night.
Yes.
Oh, indeed.
Yeah.
That was an excellent tactical move, sir. Excellent.
I think that print ran me $4, you know.
It's probably worth at least $8 now.
At least
double. It's priceless.
I think
You can't put a price tag on it.
No, you can't.
Man.
It's priceless.
No way.
It is priceless.
It is priceless.
But it's just one of those, you know, pinch me moments where you just go, wow, did that just happen? You know? And
right.
So you said Buzz. I know you are talking about Buzz
correct,
Aldrin,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
I have to ask this because my wife throws this at me all the time.
Okay.
And you triggered it when you said Buzz.
Yeah.
So she showed me some interview tape that was taken years and years ago of Buzz, and somebody asked him about the walking on the moon, and he laughed and said we were never there.
Yeah.
You know, it was all Hollywood. What is your take on all that? Because I'm not a believer in this conspiracy thing.
Yeah, I don't know that interview or what Buzz had up his sleeve. I did see the one where somebody accosted him outside of a hotel and got a nice right uppercut to the jaw for his trouble. That's another popular one, but nope. It's people would ask me that at the museum, like, do you think we really went to the moon? And I said, you know, the only thing that makes me think we did is if we faked the whole thing with movie props and special effects and studios, the Russians would have busted us on that.
You sure think so?
They would have blown they would have had a shred of it.
Great point.
Blown it right up in our face and, you know, use it as the big bullet in the Cold War. And no, the guys were really out there, and it was very, very, very hard to do.
If you think about it, the computers that they were using took up rooms. Yeah. Rooms, which now this cell phone I have in my hand has more computer power than right. And so they were still using slide rules.
Yeah.
Really, really, truly amazing.
And the other question I get at the museum is, well, you know, if we really went to the moon, how come we haven't gone back since, 1972? And I would keep a couple of props handy. I'd keep like a Frisbee and a ping pong ball handy. And I'd say, now, the Frisbee is about the diameter of the Earth. The ping pong ball is about the size of the moon. I'm going to hold the moon here. You take the Earth out. You think how far away the Earth should be. And they'd go out 7 or 8, 9 feet or something like that. And I'd go further, and they'd back up a little further. And now they're having trouble seeing the ping pong ball. And I said, you need to go out 18 and a half feet. Now look at how far away the moon is.
Right.
It's not just around the corner. It's hard to get.
It's way the hell out there.
Hard to get. Anyhow.
Hey, did all those guys have a good sense of humor?
Absolutely. They're, fighter pilot, what do they call it?
Gallows
humor, exactly.
Yeah.
A lot of the guys have been, this close to death and cheated it. And it puts a certain swagger in your walk and a little bravado in your talk. And yeah, the guys were great. I would see Wally the most of all the astronauts, but just the cracks they would make. And Wally thought that Buzz was just a little too much of a media whore, chasing the camera, chasing the microphone. going on Dancing with the Stars and doing whatever he could to get his face on the front of the.
Hopefully he'll chase our microphone. We would love to chat with him.
That would be awesome, and he would talk your ear off, absolutely. But
I could live with that.
But Wally shook his head and he said, Buzz would show up to the opening of an envelope. Yes, Wally. Yes, that's true. But Buzz showed up at the museum a couple of times with a box full of books and no advance warning and plopped down in a chair and expected to sell through. But, he needed to give us a little bit of advance warning so we can do some social media and get some people there for you. But he was a little bit of a loose cannon, all one-man show.
So, Cory, talk about I'm looking at the note that says work with Neil Armstrong and his film crew for a week for his TV show. I don't remember a Neil Armstrong TV show.
Yeah, it was called First Flights. It was on cable. And
Okay.
I first got wind of it that, the boss, he would throw me these Easter eggs every once in a while, like, hey, you want to go out to the aircraft carrier for the night? Jimmy Doolittle showing up at our back door. Would you walk him through the basement and up to my office? And so one day he flops out.
What?
Yeah, Doolittle?
What?
And he says,
you said that so flippantly. I said, wait a minute. Did he say Jimmy Doolittle?
Jimmy Doolittle.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that.
Yeah.
And he said, Armstrong's coming to the museum with the film crew for a week. And here's the instructions from the producers. There it is. He says, don't by any means ask him anything about going to the moon, One Small Step, Apollo 11, nothing. He does not want to talk about the moon at all. He will pack up his camera and his film crew and he will leave.
No pressure.
Do not let people hound him, ask him questions, anything like that. So that's my job. I'm the gopher. I'm getting the man lift for the camera. I'm getting the extension cords. I'm getting sandbags to weight things down. And I'm helping him up onto the Wright Brothers exhibit. If you have a picture of the Wright Brothers exhibit there, we tilted the storyboards to make them easy to read, but we also made them difficult for somebody to climb into the exhibit and walk around the sands of Kitty Hawk with the Wright Flyer. But I helped Neil up there because it was a killer shot with the camera descending from the ceiling and Neil, looking up at it as it came down. It was a great shot for the show, but I'd have to hold the crowd back so they didn't get in the sound of the show. And then they'd say, okay, cut, we're done shooting for a minute. We're going to rearrange the lights. And I'd let people by. And they'd say, who is that? And I say, it's nobody. We're just filming a commercial. Keep moving along, please. Move along. It'll be fine. And
good on you.
Yeah. Oh, I would not have wanted to do that in the age of social media and cell phones and things.
Right.
Oh, no way.
It would have been live. It would have been all over.
Oh, no.
All over.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
There would have been no stopping that.
But a good guy, if you want to talk about the X-15 he flew, you want to talk about his Gemini missions, he's good to go with that. You want to talk about him being a professor at the university, but do not mention anything about going to the moon. So I was good with that. Again, I'm standing next to Neil Armstrong and talking to Neil Armstrong. I'm taking Neil Armstrong out to my deli for lunch and sandwiches. Ridiculous.
How far was that? How far was that from the museum?
Oh, like a mile and a half.
All right.
I lived about 2 miles from the museum, and it was a short drive over to the deli. And it was lunchtime, and it was crowded. And Neil's in like little Dockers and a member-only jacket. And he says, so what's good around here? And I said, I like the Benny Special. I think it was a pastrami and Swiss or something. He's like, okay, I'll have that. So I order my sandwich and give the guy my name. And Neil goes up to the counter and says, I guess I'll have a Benny Special too. And the guy says, your name? And Neil kind of shrugged and looked around. He goes, Neil. Nobody knew who he was.
He didn't have his space helmet on, man.
No.
Yeah, no way.
He didn't have his
He's
little
like,
Apollo 11 logo on his shirt or nothing. So it was all good. We were all good.
It was safe. It was safe. It was safe. It's in a safe place.
Yep. But
That's great.
I'll tell you just a strange story that I haven't told much, but while I was helping Neil at the museum, of course, verboten anything about One Small Step or,
Right.
or anything like that. Well, it came time for the end of the day shooting, and Neil had to get off that exhibit. And it was going to be difficult because of the way we had tilted the storyboards. We made it purposefully difficult to get on the exhibit and almost impossible to get off. So I took one of these wood and cast iron benches that we had sprinkled around the museum, and I pushed it over towards the edge, and for Neil to like step off backwards onto the bench. And
Oh no, I know what's
and
coming.
I kind of put my hand up, in case I needed to steady him, and he stopped and he turned around. He's like, "Cory, don't touch me. Let me do it by myself." I said, "Okay, you got it." And I had my foot jammed against the slick floor and the bench so it didn't slide away. And he started to put his foot back, and I looked like I was going to, and he says, "Cory, I'm serious. If you try to catch me, I'm going to fall." I said, "Okay, I promise you I'm not going to touch you. I just don't want this bench to squirt out from underneath you." So over backwards, he came over, hopped onto the bench, kind of steadied himself on the storyboard, and you guessed it, he did like a little hop backwards onto the museum floor, and then we were done for the day. I missed it. But my subconscious realized what I had just seen, and I started to gray out. I started to get tunnel vision. I was going out, and I couldn't figure out why. And I sat down on the bench. I put my head between my legs until I could feel like the blood coming back to my head. And I'm like, "What was that? Do I need to eat a candy bar? Do I get my blood sugar up?" I completely missed it. But that night, laying in bed, I'm rolling the day's events in my head, and that moment replayed in my mind, and I'm like, "Oh, I just witnessed the first man on the moon recreate his backward hop off of the landing pad
Down onto the,
Yeah.
That's what I missed, but my self-conscious was knocking me in the head and almost made me pass out from what I had witnessed.
Right.
Crazy.
How about that?
There's probably a medical name for that. I don't know what it is, but it was.
That's
what?
Deja vu.
Deja vu all over again. I bet
Deja
Sticks will
vu
have
all
it for
over
us short order.
Oh my gosh.
Well, yeah, when people see something shocking and unbelievable and they start to pass out, now I kind of know what was going on in their head there. But just fascinating. And I eventually got the.
Oh, vasovagal event. Yeah. Blood coming out of your head and
Oh, okay. Very good.
making you dizzy. And
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just, something you saw translates itself into physical changes in your body. It's crazy. But that was all.
Well, Cory, I had a Neil Armstrong encounter, and before I knew what I'd done, I was standing in front of him with my hand out to shake his hand. He was on my flight. He was at the time on the board of directors for the airline that I worked for. And when I found out, I was sitting in the cockpit, and when the gate agent delivered the paperwork to the cockpit, I always kind of looked at the first class passengers, and 2 Delta said Neil Armstrong, and I looked at the gate agent, and the gate agent says, that Neil Armstrong. And before I realized what I'd done, I was out standing in front of him with my hand out, and he shook my hand.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Arguably the most famous human that.
Yeah.
Around.
Right. In a lot of ways.
Period.
Yeah.
Okay, Jimmy Doolittle sneaking in the servants' quarters, and you escorted him up through the bowels of what? So how does this happen? Just like it's a Tuesday, and they go, "Hey, go walk Jimmy Doolittle up to my
I
office."
had no idea we were having a VIP visitor that day, but evidently there was going to be meet and greet with the director and some pictures taken. And I'm just down in the basement of my office, just doing something, some mediocre task, writing a graphic or doing something. And the intercom, from God rings at my elbow, and the boss says, "Hey, Jimmy Doolittle's arriving by limousine at our back door at 11 o'clock this morning. Would you bring him up through the restoration area and up the elevator to my office?" And again, I'm like,
Okay.
trick question? you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So I'm wrapping my head around this, and I'm like, okay, I am going to meet Jimmy Doolittle, which is a person that I never thought I would see in person.
Right.
No way. He was probably 91, 92 at that point. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say to Jimmy Doolittle? I'm going to have his undivided attention for at least 1 minute. You know, what can I say that 1,000 other people haven't
asked him already, right?
You know,
yeah.
Said,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because Dick Rutan and Gina Yeager were here also, and after their Voyager flight, and Dick looked troubled just before the press conference started. And I said, you know, what do you need? Do you need a glass of water? You know, everything. He says, no, I'm just trying to think of something different to say. I've been giving 3 press conferences a day for the last week, and I just don't want to keep saying the same thing. So that stuck in my mind, and I'm like, well, it can't be anything about the Tokyo raid. You know, it can't be anything about B-25s. I just was, you know, my mental Rolodex was spinning. What can I do? So 11 o'clock shows up, the limousine pulls up, back door pops open, and out steps General James Doolittle in a black suit. And I'm just blown away. He had his little Medal of Honor medal around his collar and steadied himself with a cane. I offered my arm and I welcomed him. I said I was going to, you know, take him up to the director's office, and we walked slowly through the restoration shop, and we had 2 or 3 projects going on down there. I can't remember what they were, but I was showing him, you know, over here's the F3F, here's the, you know, Howard Hughes H1, and of course I had already called the elevator, so it was there when we got in, and he kind of steadied himself on one corner and stuck his cane down on the floor so he wouldn't slip. And I pressed the button for the second floor, and I said, you know, General, we may experience a little extra G's on our ride today, but nothing like rounding the pylon in Cleveland in a GB.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And his eyes came up off the floor real slowly and kind of met mine. And he kind of nodded a little bit and gave a little chuckle. And then the doors opened up and we stepped out. And I'm like, yes.
Well done, sir.
Well played, CC.
Well
played.
done.
Got a little reaction
Man.
from the general, but
Indeed. Well, these are some fantastic stories. What I'd like to do is talk for just a minute or two about the people who are making these stories coming to you possible.
Greetings to all you future airline pilots. Repeat here from So There I Was. And if you've ever aspired to pilot a commercial jet, you've got to hear about Flight Training International. Since 1993, FTI has been the front line in transforming capable military pilots into world-class commercial aviators. What sets FTI apart? Well, first off, they're simulators. We're talking full-motion FAA-certified rigs that replicate everything from an A330 to a Boeing 777. These are the same simulators used by the big names in flying. Airbus, Boeing, all the airlines, you name it, ensuring you train under the most realistic conditions possible. FTI's story starts with its founders, veterans who knew the struggles of transitioning to commercial aviation firsthand. They experienced the inefficiencies of the traditional path and decided to forge a new one, focusing exclusively on what it takes to pilot large airliners. No more underwhelming sessions in light twins. At FTI, you train in the big leagues. Every instructor at FTI is a seasoned commercial pilot equipped with decades of experience in both military and commercial sectors. These aren't just teachers, they're mentors who have navigated the very skies that you aim to conquer. They understand the complexities of modern and global routes, ensuring that you're not just certified, but truly prepared for anything the job throws your way. And there's more. FTI's training programs are meticulously crafted to accommodate your schedule. Their courses are available via an innovative iPad app allowing you to study anytime, anywhere. Whether you're on a boat, overseas, or relaxing at home, FTI brings the classroom to you. And so here's the coolest part. You can use your VA benefits to pay your tuition at FTI. And if you mention So There I Was when you register, you'll receive an additional $100 off your first course. Whether you're eyeing a type rating or the ATP certificate, ATP CTP, FTI is your gateway to the big time. Visit FTIratings.com to start your journey. Remember, that's FTIratings.com. Flight Training International, where your career ascension begins.
Oh, that was well played with General Doolittle. Very cool. You, at another point, met another famous World War II.
Rhymes with Admiral Hirohito.
Oh, well, that one too. Yeah, I was thinking of someone who brought Hirohito to our to us, brought him coming to us, but which was gent who led the raid over Hiroshima.
Oh, yeah.
In August of 45. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Mr. Paul Tibbets there. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. If you rounded up all the people on Earth that have been an arm's length of Neil Armstrong, General Doolittle, Paul Tibbets, and Hirohito, it's going to be probably count them on one.
Count them on one podcast, and we're talking to him now.
Crazy. Yeah, I was a 17-year-old freshman at UCSD, my first semester there, and I must have gotten word on a bulletin board or something, but Hirohito was making his first visit to the U.S. that week. He was hitting the East Coast, and he was going to finish up on the West Coast, and he was actually going to stop at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. He fancied himself a bit of an amateur oceanographer. Really? I think on the East Coast, he visited the Woods Hole Institute. And so I said, I've got that stupid math class on Friday morning. I don't care about that. I'm going to ditch class and go down and see what Hirohito looks like. And
there you go.
There was a winding sidewalk that made its way from the curb to the front door. And people were lining the grass on either side of the sidewalk. And I joined them. And didn't have to wait long. A limousine pulled up, and the Emperor's party got out, and he was wearing a little fedora hat and shuffling along pretty good. But the applause started as he exited the car and started making his way towards the front door, and it grew as he walked. More and more people joined with the applause, and he looked up from underneath the brim of his hat, and our eyes just briefly met. And he looked a little embarrassed. He looked a little like, oh no, I just want to get in here and not be embarrassed like this. But walked on by in the front door. The front door is closed, and I said, well, I got to get back to class. But it was just a brush with history, and I was 17. Who knew I was going to have a career in museums? Nobody. But I just love history and the people who make it. And that was a like I said, just a brush with the history you're not going to get anywhere else. That was amazing.
No.
Lucky me.
No.
Yeah,
that is awesome.
Crazy.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Well, but back briefly then to Paul Tibbets.
Yeah.
We have a mutual friend who passed after last year on our show, who he also ran into Paul Tibbets.
Correct.
Right? You told me, yeah.
I ran into Paul at an air show somewhere where he was at a booth and autographing his book, and got to chat with him for a few minutes. Not a long time. There are people in line, but you want to chat him up. I framed up his autograph with his service ribbons and a picture of him standing outside the plane, and it made a nice little presentation piece with it. And I'm sitting, I guess, probably at an air show booth in Reno or something, chatting with my buddy Punchy. And I'm telling him about some of these people I met, Doolittle and General Benjamin Davis, the Tuskegee Airman guy, and Paul Tibbets. And Brian flops out. Yeah, I was still flying A-10s out of Davis-Monthan and came back from a training mission. And it was just hot out, and I was beat, and I came up to the flight line, and there was a bench, and some old guy was sitting on the bench, and I just flopped down just to get a little bit of breeze before I went and got changed. And I looked down at the end of the field, and they were towing a B-29 across the road from the Pima County Air Museum. They had the gates open, and they were towing the B-29 over to the runway. It looked like they were going to do some kind of an advertisement or photo shoot. And this guy's like, "Oh, you fly A-10s?" And Brian's like, "Yeah, doing so many years and flew A-7s before that." And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to have my picture taken with that plane there. I'm Colonel Tibbets." We're like, "Ah, you're kidding me. You just flopped down next to the guy." I was beside myself. I'm like, "Man, you are so lucky, man. You are in the right place at the right time. That's for sure."
Wow. Yeah.
And
so his grandson is a friend of mine, and
that's awesome.
we got to chatting about the tactics of that. People may not, it's in some books, and it's in his book among other things, but the interesting thing that he did, his tactician mind said, we've got to lull them into a sense of security. And so he's the one that said, we're going to fly B-29s over Japan every day. And not drop bombs, take some photos. And so he lulled them into thinking that those were just photo missions.
Yeah.
So when it came time to drop Little Boy and Fat Man, it was there was no fighter resistance.
Yeah, nobody came up to ward them off. They were probably just a weather plane or
photo reconnaissance, something. Yeah.
Well, in essence, they were photo reconnaissance because the U.S. wanted an untouched, unscathed city in order to test the bombs out on. And wow.
Well, they had that. Man, quite the flash photography that day.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was.
But
well, what's the matter, Fig? Too soon?
Too soon.
I don't know. I feel like you were with us, a group of us that went up there and went through Peace Park there at Hiroshima.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was something.
Very somber place.
Yes.
But
so they still have the cranes to this day, the paper cranes all folded by the millions. It's well worth the visit to go to the Hiroshima Peace Park.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And we were talking again at a booth. Well, the evolution of me and Punchy basically started off as a vendor and a salesman. He got this book, and I read it, and I needed to meet the guy who wrote this thing. And I wrote up a nice story for the paper. When he passed, the paper asked me for 600 words, and I said, "Geez, I could give you 6,000 words."
Right.
And I wrote this article, and Sierra Hotel Aeronautics picked it up and posted it on their website. So
nice.
It's the story of how we met. And Brian would come down to my museum and would go into the theater and put on a little slideshow, a little dog and pony show to get people salivating about the book. And then we'd go out in the...
it was this Sled Driver?
This was
his book Sled Driver?
The original Sled Driver. And,
okay.
And then he'd say, hey, I'm at Riverside, or I'm at Oxnard, or I'm at Salinas. Why don't you come on up and hang out? And I would start traveling around the country and being part of the air show booth crew and just enjoying his company and camaraderie. And again, the gallows humor was always kind of fun, and going out to dinner afterwards and being... After 10 years in the museum and filling it up full of airplanes and spacecraft, I moved over to the retail and wholesale end of the business. So I was handling that end of the museum. And so I could run the booth while he, took a break, went away somewhere. And it just got to be a real symbiotic relationship where he'd come to the museum, sell books for me. I'd come to the air show and help him out. I've got one Punchy story if we got time.
Oh yeah, we got time.
Yeah, it's not much of an airplane story, but it's an insight into the man. You guys got a good dose of him on your podcast, so you got a little bit of flavor of him. But I can't remember if it was Miramar or Nellis, but we were in his air show booth, and business was good. People were 3 deep, and I'm trying to help them. You want a book? You want a poster? You want a print? You want a keychain? What do you want? And I'm taking money, and if somebody wants their book autographed, I'm bringing Brian over to take care of that business. And I see a gentleman with a young boy, probably 8 or 9 years old, approaching the booth, and I'm thinking, they've got a question about the Blackbird. How high does it fly? How fast does it fly? I said, I'm going to just kind of eavesdrop a little bit because I'm pretty sure I know all about the blackbird by then, but somebody might ask a question I hadn't heard of yet. So I kind of, bent an ear over towards the corner, and this guy came over and shook Brian's hand, and he says, Mr. Shul, this is my son, Johnny. Well, Johnny wasn't his real name, but this is my son, Johnny, and Johnny likes to set fires inside of our house.
What?
And it was like throwing a switch on Brian Shul. He was not the sled driver anymore. He said, he turned to me, he said, Cory, take over. And he took this gentleman and his son in the corner of the booth and knelt down and shook the little boy's hand, and then took the boy's hand and ran it up over his scar tissue in his arm and his fingers. And the little boy was just mesmerized. And I'm trying to help customers, and I'm catching a little bit of the conversation. And Brian's saying, I was in a fire once, and it hurt real bad, and it made me cry a lot. Talking in terms of little boy Stan. And he says, oh, no, my skin will always look like this. It'll never get better. This is how I'm going to look forever. And the little boy was just running his hands over the bumpy scar tissue. And then Brian says something like, you need to listen to your dad. Listen to what your dad tells you to do. And then he stood up and they shook hands. And I was kind of choking up a little bit listening to what was going on. And then Brian turned around and stepped forward, and he was, suddenly he was the sled driver again, and he was back to selling books and things. But that he would take time out of his day and lose sales and just turn his back on the crowd and say, Cory, take over, so he could give this individual attention to this little boy. It speaks volumes of, what was important to Brian.
Right.
Well, thank you for that.
Yeah, indeed. Well, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know? And I know there's a gray area, and I don't want to go into there. Is there any way to get any of his books, or is it all secondhand market now?
If you go to his website, they are selling his books. I'm not sure if he left some behind that were autographed or not. I can't really find anything on the website that says sign.
Okay.
But they're still available. It's a sleddriver.com or gallery1.com. They're still selling them, but not quite.
So I think the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds books were out of print, but the Sled Driver and Untouchables, were still available.
Yeah, that was
when last I looked. And Lawman was going to actually ship me his Blue Angels book just so I could see it. Yep. Like, dude, don't do. If it gets lost, it's gone forever.
Oh yeah, don't do
that. Yeah. Brian brought me one that he had on a debrief and had the entire team sign it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, down to I think 12 or 13 were the maintenance guys and the one that filled the tires.
Right.
He handed it to me and he said, "No, I don't want to see this on eBay tomorrow." Not a chance, pal. Not a chance. But those books have been out of print for a while. Brian kept promising he was going to reprint the Blue Angel book. In fact, it might have been on your podcast. He says, "I promise before I die, I'll reprint that Blue Angel book." And things get away.
And a scant 3 weeks later, he was gone.
Yeah, stuff like that happens. But anyhow.
We were blessed to encounter him.
Scott Crossfield. How did you meet Scott Crossfield?
Oh, that was just a happenstance. I was at the museum one day up in the entrance rotunda, and a gentleman in, nice comfortable slacks and a pullover sweater, salt and pepper hair, walks up to the ticket booth, and he says, "I'm Scott Crossfield. I've got an appointment with the director." And I overheard that, and I pushed myself up to the ticket window, and I hit the no sale on the register, and I gave him a ticket to get inside. And I said, use this to get into the entrance across the way, and I'll tell McKellar you're on your way up. And he says, "No, don't, please. I'd like to walk through the museum a little bit and just enjoy it. I guarantee you I'll be able to find my own way up to the office when I'm ready." And I said,
Nice.
Absolutely, enjoy your visit. And he walked into the entrance, and I don't know how long he took, but I'm sure he found his way up to the boss's office. The next day, I'm up in the entrance again, and I see him walk in the entrance, kind of looking around a little bit, starts walking over towards the counter. I just got another ticket and pushed it across the counter to him. Didn't say a word. And he took the ticket, nodded, and went in the exhibit area. He was in there a couple more hours. Must have just read everything and touched everything and just really enjoyed 100,000 square feet of airplanes and spacesuits and autographs. And I had one book in the store called The Edge of Space by Milton. I can't remember what his name is, but he was an X-15 pilot. And it's the only book I had that had anything in the X-15 in there, so I got it ready. And when Scott popped out the exit, I motioned for him to come in the store and asked him if he would sign the book. And sure, he signed it up real nice on the title page. And he says, you seem like you've been here a long time. You know a lot of stuff about the museum. And I said, oh, yeah. And he kind of jerks his thumb and he said, did you have anything to do with all those airplanes and exhibits back there? Did you have anything to do with that? And I said, well, it's a big secret, but for the first 10 years, it was me and my boss, just two guys doing all of that stuff, filling the showcases and writing the graphics and painting the nose art on the airplanes. And he says, really, two guys did that? And I said, well, when you show up for work every morning and ready
shit to do.
You can get a lot done in 10 years. And he gave me a quick little handshake and he says, well done. That was good.
Nice.
That was good for me. That was
hell yeah.
And then every time I'd watch a special on the X-15 and there'd be footage of Scott Crossfield, I would just pinch myself, go get that book and double check that signature. I guess I really did meet him.
That's awesome.
It's wild. Just wild. Let's see here. Yeah, I've got a picture of me and my boss outside the elevator if you put that on your website. He was another great guy, like a second father. He was a retired lieutenant in the Navy, and he really wasn't that interested in working in the museum. He was more of a researcher. He spent his days down at the library going through old microfiche and things. So I pretty much had the joint to myself, depending on what I wanted to do that day. But
well, that's pretty outstanding as well.
Yeah.
And you were telling me a little bit about some of the work that goes on there at the museum, including, you said, for several I think it was months, that you walked in while some engine restoration was being done for some piston engines.
Yeah, we had the basement took up about a third of the room underneath the full museum, and they had a complete machine shop, a paint booth. When the manufacturers like Rohr and Ryan would get rid of their old lathes and things, they would donate them to us. So we were well equipped in the basement to build anything. We built a Japanese Zero from spare parts and manufactured what we didn't have, and just ground up restorations. And we also had our own engine shop. So depending on whether the plane was going to fly again or not, they would either restore it to a static display or restore it to run. And one day this huge crate showed up at the back door, and I'm like, wow, what is that? And somebody said it's one of the engines off the Enola Gay. They're planning on exhibiting the aircraft, and they want us to take apart the engines right down to the nuts and bolts and screws and springs and completely overhaul it and put it back together and preserve it for generations. So 3 more of those shipping containers came through our back door eventually. We restored one at a time. But it was another one of those things where I would go out of my way to walk through the engine shop in the morning before they started working and just oogle at the engine, and the those cylinders were about as big as around a coffee can, for God's sake.
Great.
God, it was
and probably 18 would be my guess, at least.
Yeah. It was just a monster. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Well, I've got one good story, not about a famous guy, but down in the basement, besides making the full-scale aircraft, they had a model shop. And that was my dad's bailiwick, boy. He retired from Ryan and Rohr as an engineer, and he became a model builder of some repute. Paul Garber from the Smithsonian came out one day to go through his workshop and declared him a master model maker.
Wow.
Paul Garber. I did a double take when he walked by. And so Dad established a fairly extensive model shop at the museum, and volunteers that were especially handy with small, intricate items gravitated to the model shop, and they kept the museum full of models. So one day, a man and his wife came in, and the man was having difficulty speaking and was evidently having some trouble, and his wife introduced him as Joseph Winkler. He had had a stroke recently and was trying to recover from it. And he was a World War II Luftwaffe aircrew.
Okay.
And we're like, well, he's welcome. You know, we don't know what we're going to do with him, but he's welcome to come down here and help us. And they toured the entire basement. They came through the model shop, and Joseph was making sounds and grunting like, this is the place I want to be. I want to be in here. So my father assigned him a mentor to kind of watch over him and help him with tools and fragile things. And eventually Joseph regained some of his speech, which was fun because I knew a little German and he had a little English, and we try to communicate a little bit. One day somebody donated a pair of black leather Luftwaffe boots that were lined with rabbit fur, and I brought them back to the model shop, and oh, Joseph's eyes got huge. And I said, you had a pair of these, didn't you? And he nodded, and he was rubbing his hands over the boot, and you could just tell he was back in his airplane again. And eventually, the fellow that was his mentor at the museum got little tidbits of information. What did he fly? You know, a Messerschmitt 210. What kind of? It was a night fighter that had the radar on the nose. And where did he fly out of? And what was the squadron number? And through the grunting and the pointing and things, this fellow made enough information that he was able to craft a model of Joseph's airplane.
Wow.
That's way cool.
And I got the call, like, Cory, bring your camera down to the model shop. We need you. And I said, okay. Grab my camera. The battery's always charged. I go down to the model shop, and here's my dad and this mentor, Larry. Joseph has no idea what's going on, but we called his wife, Ada, into the model shop. She would pick him up at the end of every day. And we also had the president of the museum down there. And I said, oh, something's going on if the president's down here. And Larry said a few words and took this model that was in a plastic showcase and handed it to Joseph. And all you could hear was the click of my shutter.
Wow.
Fantastic. And I said, you know, I think you guys are building a lot more than models down here.
Right. That's great.
Yeah. Not a big story, not a famous guy, but a lot of that happened down there at the museum. It had a big heart, and everybody was a volunteer. So, you know, you knew they wanted to be there. And
Right.
even on days.
And how long were you at the museum?
I was there 20 years. Okay. 1980 to 2000.
To 2000. That's right. You said that earlier.
Like I said, it was ridiculous that it was just a great timing because I was 22 when I started, 42 when I left. The astronauts were, the astronauts had been on the moon like 8 years before that. So astronauts were still in their 40s and 50s and coming to our golf tournaments and coming to our silent auctions. And the guys that showed up at the America's Fighter Race Association I mentioned during the opening they had in San Diego, there were about 200 guys sitting at tables having dinner at the Town and Country. So, you know, 20 years later, there were a whole lot less guys sitting down for dinner. So my timing was exquisite. Access to Mercury, Gemini, Apollo guys, World War II aces.
It's fantastic. I'm so jealous.
Yeah. You know, everything that aviation history books were written about.
Yes.
Right?
You know, aerospace history books were written about. You talk to these people.
Yeah.
All right, will you tell a funny story of Zeke being at one of your father's National Society of Aerospace Professionals black tie dinner in his dress whites?
Yeah. Let me
Yeah.
let me see here how much.
In fact, let me jump in and say so he'll tell that one, which is a great story. He told me yesterday when we did a pre-chat, and then I'd like to probably land the plane on that, and then we're going to do our extra this week with the story about Zeke and Wally Schirra doing a live TV feed.
That'd be a good one for the patrons. That'd be a good one.
There you go.
Okay.
All right. So
let's land this thing.
Yeah.
So Dad was an engineer, aerospace engineer in San Diego, and working for Rohr and Convair and guys like that. And he was president of the National Society of Aerospace Professionals. Can you see the logo on the wall behind me? It's an old.
There you go.
Oh, yeah.
See, I thought it was like NAS Payne Field, NASP, but National Society of Aerospace Professionals, NASP.
And he would actually, an earlier program featured Zeke and my boss, Ed McKellar. They were still former Blue Angels. They hadn't even gone to Vietnam yet. And it was just odd coincidence that he would run into them, and 20 years later they'd be my bosses. But Dad was sponsoring a black tie affair at the swanky El Cortez high-rise hotel, the tallest building in downtown San Diego, had a glass elevator, very fancy place. And Zeke was the keynote speaker. He was going to get up there and tell stories of flying in the World War II and Hellcat and flying in the Korea and the Blue Angels. And it was going to be a heck of a night. And he's in his dress whites and just looking sharp with medals on his chest. And my parents are sitting up on the dais and finishing up dinner. And Zeke, I guess, needed to ask my dad a question. And he kind of leaned in between my mother and my father to ask Dad a question. And my mother turns to him and grabbed his arm and says, "Oh, waiter, could you please bring me some more water?" Now, my dad and Zeke just froze. They both froze.
Oh my
And
God.
slowly this shit-eating grin spread across Zeke's face. And he says, "Yes, ma'am. Right away, ma'am." And my dad just looking for a hole. And my mom's like, what? And my dad's like, "Never mind, Ruby, never mind." And Zeke comes back within about a minute, and he's got a pitcher of water, and he's draped a towel over his arm.
Of course he did. Yes,
And
he
he
did.
leans in between my dad and my mother, and he tops off her water, and she's like, "Oh, thank you so much." And he's like, "My pleasure, ma'am." And my dad is just like, "Oh, I'm never going to hear the end of this." Zeke puts the water down, and the next minute or so, they introduce the keynote speaker of the evening, Commander Zeke Cormier of the Blue Angels, and he steps up to the microphone, and guess whose turn it was to look for a hole?
Yeah, right.
Mom was just like, "Oh no, oh,
Mama can't get
no,
small enough.
no."
Well, he was a good sport about
that
it,
would
and
be-
yet that just shows his character.
Right.
He wasn't so full of himself that he couldn't
Funny guy.
he couldn't have a little fun with
Funny
it.
guy. Yeah, I'll have a little extra story for you guys after the close. But
That'll be fun and well worth it. And for anybody who wants to hear it, come on over to sothereiwas.us/Patreon and join up there, and you can get our extra content that we do every week for the folks who go out of their way and throw their hard-earned money in our direction to keep these stories coming to every one of you. And if you can't afford it, that's okay. What you can do, though, is share this show. Tell everybody about the podcast so that the audience continues to grow. We're over 1,400 strong on our Facebook page now and growing. Keep getting those listeners coming in, because the more we grow, the more good stories we get, more people coming in. So, but thank you for those wonderful stories. And
I
we
had
also
a
wanna-
horrible time for 20 years. You can tell it was just a horrible.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was a terrible job having to get up and go down to that office.
Struggle every day to have
Yeah.
to go to work.
Somebody had to do it.
Someone had to do it. That's right. And also thank you to all of those who have served and the veterans who have sacrificed so much, and their families who sacrificed so much so that we can have the freedoms we have. We're deeply deeply grateful to you. Get him, Fig.
Are we froze?
No, we're not.
Sure
I'm waiting for you to lean in and move on.
Hey,
we're going to land this plane. You're on glide slope.
Throw a big thank you out to Dave Hamilton, right?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Dave. Dave Hamilton, Backbeat Media. And what's the company that?
That's it. Backbeatmedia.com. They handle advertising for the podcast, handles our advertising, and they've got 3 shows: the Mac Geek Gab, the Gig Gab for musicians, and the Business Brain for entrepreneurs. So, and the Mac Geek Gab's all about technical Macintosh computers, iPads, iPhones, NAS drives, and any and all things technical. So, but thank you to Dave for giving us the support and intelligence to make this podcast come to you as well.
Thank you to our sponsor this week, FTIratings.com.
Absolutely. Those folks, go get them. Do your type rating. Get your ATP in a simulator that's air conditioned with professionals.
Don't do it in an Apache.
No.
Or a Navajo.
That's only end badly.
Beaten up badly, and, well, let's just leave it at that.
Right? Exactly. Hey, listen to us wherever you find podcasts. And like I said, when you share it with other folks, you can listen to us on Google, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Play, all those places. And when you do listen to us on one of those places, particularly Apple Podcast, get out there and give us a 5-star rating, please. Not 4, not 3. God help you if you try to give us a 2 or a 1-star rating. We're going to hunt you down. Fix your wagon.
If you can't give us a 5-star rating, tell us what we need to do to make it a 5-star, because we're trainable.
We are trainable. Big's trainable.
Yeah.
I'm trainable.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Yeah.
Hey, couple 3 other folks making this all happen and making the pictures come up on the video stream as we record in the background there. Thank you to Sticks and Bago. You guys are magic.
Badass Silcott from BDS Aviation Photography.
Right?
Thanks. Thank you, gents.
Good stuff. And I hear the band coming in.
Well, that's the Air Force F-16 pilots that make the Air Force sound good. That's the Dos Gringos.
Count them, both of them. Uno, dos Gringos. Indeed.
They have 4 albums out there where you get your music anywhere, and there's not a bad song on any one of them.
Not a one.
They're all awesome.
They are fantastic. So good stuff. Well, I don't know, Fig. What do you think? Until next week, any advice for the folks?
Well, don't sit on the ejection seat handle.
Yeah, don't do it.
Well, there I was, crossing the pond, and you could see that I wasn't exactly fond of all the shit I was wearing on that day. Now an F-16 is cramped enough, but it's even worse with all that stuff supposed to save your life. But we knew there was no way. 'Cause when you're going down the North Atlantic, man, it's over.
It's what?
He said it's over.
Sorry, folks, park's closed. The moose out front should have told you.
The moose out front should have told you, damn it.
That's right. And we are